The opportunities for biodiversity, my sense, is in two specific areas. It's in the work on the economy, and it's in the work on material conditions. Material conditions being the physical and social conditions. So, in the work on the economy, the kinds of issues that I think from a biodiversity perspective we need to be feeding in, and in fact, DG, from a broader environmental perspective, and I think that has been happening. What is the potential impact on the natural resource base of business as usual in the next 15 years? What are the opportunities for economic growth from so-called greening activities, and I'll get back to that. What are the links with climate change? What are the opportunities specifically for job creation? That goes also back to the greening issues. Making the case for broadening the measure of economic growth. And I think this is it's a really critical issue. We may not get it right this time round, but it's an important discussion that is starting to emerge in the green economy context, and it's emerging in the national planning context. So including, as I've said earlier, the health of ecosystem services. On the question of material conditions, some of the issues again that came up in Mandy's slides: status of the natural resource base, what is the potential for lower carbon, more resource efficient and climate resilient economy, and what does this mean for Vision 2025? Moving then to emerging themes, and really this is a continuation of the issues for the Planning Commission. The whole question of sustainable development in the green economy. What is the contribution of biodiversity and ecosystem services? And here, some of the work that you are doing, I think, is really critical to this discussion. Mapping of critical biodiversity areas, mapping of sensitive areas, mapping of freshwater ecosystem priority areas, ecological support areas, but very, very importantly, and this is a big and in capital letters, the relationship with priorities for mining, for industry, for agriculture, for rural livelihoods, for tourism, for human settlements. That link is the critical link. Just in a very brief exchange, I've just heard from the DG that in fact some of the biodiversity mapping that you are doing around sensitive areas is already in discussion with Department of Mineral Resources around mapping the relationship of the biodiversity sensitive areas with the mineral priority development areas, and starting that negotiation and discussion of where it matches, where it doesn't. So the questions are: what are the major areas of overlap? As an example, the mineral resources question. What are the potential zones of negotiation now, and what are the potential zones of negotiation in the future? Always add the so what narrative. So what? So what if we've got a beautiful map of the rivers, the wetlands, the estuaries? What does this mean? Why is this important? Why is it important for water production? Why is it important in relation to soil? Why is it important for making sure that there are healthy, happy people in a particular area? What are the consequences of unsustainable land use? Pollution of land, water, compromised ability to ensure water and food security, and make the link with what is the financial burden for the state. And I think air pollution is an example. It's not necessarily in the biodiversity zone, but it's a very good example in which colleagues that are working on air quality management have really been able to demonstrate that the work on air quality management actually is a saving of 2 billion per annum in health costs. Now that is quite a headline figure. It's a sound bite that is usable and that makes politicians sit up. And I think when we're talking about influence, we're seeking all areas of influence, and that needs to include politicians. In terms of the emergent theme of climate change, for me here, a key question is, what do we mean by climate resilient development? What does that actually mean? Off the cuff, well, it means the same as sustainable development. It means that we're making sure that our social systems, our economic systems, our ecosystems are climate-proof. But let's take it the next step further. And to what extent can biodiversity practitioners really start making practical recommendations on what that means? What and where are the risk areas? Very critical issue. I think it's some of the work that Guy Mitchell is doing, and probably also the Department of Science and Technology is doing some of this work. What are the what ecosystem service must be managed in order to reduce the risk of droughts, floods, compromised water and food security? And again, I think the maps from Mandy is starting to get to point in that direction. To what extent does the work that is being done on production landscapes, and that was something very exciting that I read about. I knew about the work that's being done in grasslands, but I was not familiar with the work that is being done, for example, on potato farmlands in the Western Cape, in sugarcane farms. So it's about the narrative and the language of influence. And here I've put the sphere of control to the right, and we now are aware of what that sphere of control is. It's that area that we feel comfortable in. We know it's our zone. It's the work that we do. We know that we like doing that, and it's our work. The sphere of influence then is 90% of the work from now in terms of effort and time. I would suggest. And it's really about the language of what are the implications of losing natural capital, what are the implications for water security, for food security, the implications for people's livelihoods, the implications for Southern Africa. And I think this is a critical one, also in all of the work around adaptation and climate resilience. We share rivers, and I mean, you know that, I don't need to tell you that. We share rivers with our neighbors. We share airspace with our neighbors. There's a huge amount of exchange and trade and interdependence. I started by saying I felt extremely excited about catching up with where the biodiversity sector and team of people in this country is going. You're doing remarkable work. It's quite remarkable work. And there, Tanya's quite right that the environment sector is actually being seen as slightly ahead of the game. In fact, not only slightly, quite ahead of the game in terms of really making this outcomes-based approach work, making this integrated and strategic planning process work. And here I would like to say that the biodiversity group is ahead, even ahead. Of the 4 outputs plus the cross-cutting sector, the work of biodiversity biodiversity team is really ahead, is leading the way. Your policy and legal framework is in place. Your planning tools are in place. There are significant programs that are world-renowned in place. All the Working For programs, the Working For Water, the Working For Wetlands, the Working For Fire, etc. The People and Parks work is in place and growing. Research work, mapping, etc. So there is remarkable work being done in the sector. My sense would be that the focus now is on sharpening the skills and tools for translating and interpreting your knowledge, your profession, your practice, so that it makes sense to economists, to social scientists, to development practitioners, and to politicians. And lastly, I think it's absolutely critical to build the network of champions in all walks of life to support the work that you as biodiversity practitioners are doing. And that means that you are expanding your influence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judy.